I had 3 outfits, but I took this one this morning. And this one is it's a T-shirt from the former Eastern Germany part. And it was sold to me by a young man, and he made it himself. And he said, it's a symbol of my generation in the former Eastern Germany part. And we have the feeling that others took over our society, and we're not able to protest or to say what we want. And it reminded me, when I took it on this morning, of a meeting that I was invited to 2 weeks ago. It was in the southern part of Holland, and there were 160 people there, and they all had somehow a link with intensive cattle breeding. And some may think that Holland is a crowded country. Well, poultry, we have more poultry than people here in this country, and 5 million pigs on top of that. And what I saw there was a company doing nearly 10 billion euros a year without making profit at the moment, and they're just in meat processing. And I saw family farmers' businesses in deep financial trouble, unable to sell their businesses at this moment. And I saw activists, and I saw local politicians and regional politicians, and I saw bankers with a headache over their portfolios and bad loans to these farmers. And altogether, I saw a Dutch sector, economic sector there, that's in deep trouble, deep trouble. And to many of them, their future is a mist. They don't know whether they should go that way or that way. And if they protest, nobody else seems to hear them. And I told them, I was just invited there to give my feedback on the end of the day. That was my only role there. And on the end of the day, I was quite nervous, because I'm educated as a product designer. And I thought, who am I? I'm not a crisis manager. I can't even manage to manage my own agenda. What do I do there? But when I started talking, by the end of the day, everyone became extremely quiet. And I told them a few things about what I've learned from large lines in change in society. And I told them that they had been through a historic path. Once being a sector that was flourishing, that was excelling, and then in 20, 30 years' time, they went from that flourishing situation to a kind of terrible state that they are now in. And I showed them that other sectors in society and history had gone through the same period, but somehow they managed to get over that. And that gave them hope. And then I told them, especially to the people who did things differently there in that room, and tried to sell the best meat in Holland and the most sustainably produced meat in Holland, publicly rewarded, but they said to me, I can't even sell it to the market. No one wants to buy it from me. And to those people I said that the typical timelines of front-running innovators does not at all match the typical timeline of politicians, nor the typical timelines of investors. So if as a sector you want to get out of that swamp, you have to help each other, and you have to support the people who are doing interesting things. And that's what today is about as well. You as a person see things happening, people trying to do things differently, and they need your support, and they need my support. Is the agricultural transition, well, why not take a slide for that? Is the agricultural transition, it works. In this part of the world, the only thing that the Dutch are concerned about, no, it's not. I could tell how they got there. In 1655, our yield per hectare was very low. And centuries it did like this. And then in the mid-18th century in England, the mechanical revolution started. And after that, in Germany, the chemical revolution came. And in 1900, society as a whole in the Netherlands went into a general rationalizing process. And in that last period, there were 3 famines, 1880, 1930s, 1944. And after the Second World War, and we had to rebuild this country anyhow, there were people saying, okay, we are in the most fruitful, the most fertile parts of Europe in this delta. Let's do things differently. And they started to really change the whole countryside. And they put a series of interventions there. And from the 1950s, after centuries of nearly doing nothing, the yield, output, agricultural output per hectare, did this. And the agricultural system went into a kind of J kind of curve upwards. And everyone agreed upon that. And the underlying value was a very simple one: maximize the agricultural output per hectare. Is it the only thing that's now bothering? I mean, we're now on top of that J, and no one knows whether to extend it or be on a plateau or break things down. Is it the only story that's bothering us? No, it's not. I could tell a similar story with a few tweaks about the financial system, about our construction sector, about our healthcare system, about our decision-making system even. This society, in this part of the world, is on the verge of going from one fabric to another one, with the complication that the individual threads making up the fabric are not moving in sync. So now finance, today, is where agriculture was 20 years ago. The first ecological attacks happened then in agriculture. Decline in profits, zoonoses, cattle diseases, Q fever, well, you name it. And that all added up as counter forces against that original, generally felt legitimization. And there comes a point in history where it's coming to a balance. And from there, the system goes in transition. And no one knows the future. And what's a societal transition? The way I see a societal transition is when a significant piece of the societal cake starts working differently, and niches building upon new value sets fight their way up to the level of routines. And that's what I experienced there in that room, that agricultural meeting, 160 people, deep distress, some people trying to do things differently. And in finance, it's exactly the same. And in energy supply system transition, it's exactly the same. So we're in a fabric going from one state to another, and the individual threads are not moving in sync, and that causes a lot of hatred and a lot of anger and a lot of feeling not heard by the rest of society. So, if there's anything I would like to give you today, is to encourage, to understand what's happening, that there are long lines of change at this very moment, and that we need to support people who try to think differently. And if we do that well, then I believe that the future of this part of the world will be truly exciting. But if we don't do it and stick as long as we can to the old J-curve, where no one originally put a ceiling on top, no one designed a ceiling to this J-curve originally, and we don't have the means to discuss that. And if we don't pay attention to people who at the top of that J-curve want to do things differently because they feel that it should be different for the future, then things can become pretty nasty in this part of the world the next few decades, I think. Mark. Thanks very much.